Running Up That Hill must have set a new record for the longest time period between a song's release and it reaching the American top 10. The song was originally released in August of 1985 as the lead single off of Kate Bush's fifth album, Hounds of Love, which came out a month later. In most parts of the world, Running Up That Hill was quite successful in the months after its release, but the song and the album both stalled at number 30 on the US Billboard charts, which for me, growing up in England, was pretty crazy. It was a huge hit in the UK. And, as you may know, if you follow me, one of my favourite albums and one of my favourite songs from one of my favourite albums. In a remarkable development in June of 2022, almost 37 years after its first release, the song became the most streamed song around the world and improved on its original chart position in almost every country. When we shot this video, it had reached the number 1 position in many places and number 4 in the Billboard singles charts, while Hounds of Love could be found at the top of the US alternative album charts. Pretty amazing, if you ask me, and about time too. The amazing and sudden resurgence in popularity of Running Up That Hill was the result of the song being featured in Season 4 of the Netflix series Stranger Things as a pivotal plot device. By contrast, the rather profound concepts that underlie the use of the song may have escaped many people. According to the Netflix series music supervisor, Nora Felder, the song perfectly illustrates the moment when the main character runs toward connection and the spiritual outpouring of love powerfully manifested by her dear friends who have heroically fought to understand what she needs and rescue her from a solitary hell of utter separation and eternal isolation. In some ways, this scene can be understood as alluding more broadly to the inner struggles with private demons that many teens wrestle with during troubled times, especially when feeling alone and estranged from others. If this sounds a little theatrical, perhaps better to quote Kate Bush, who simply declared herself astounded by the developments, and on her website issued the following statement. How utterly brilliant. It's hard to take in the speed at which this has all been happening since the release of the first part of the Stranger Things new series. So many young people who love the show discovering the song for the first time. How incredible is that? A song that I grew up loving, it is amazing to see its success all over again. Many songs have gained dramatically in popularity after they were used in advertisements and movies or TV series. For example, we recently looked at the Electric Light Orchestra's 1977 song, Mr. Blue Sky, which became one of the most popular songs of the 21st century, in part due to its use in a Volkswagen ad in 2002. But what happened with Running Up That Hill is extraordinary. The haunting 80s song appears to have struck a deep chord with an entire young 21st century generation, and this clearly has to do with the formidable and timeless qualities of the song itself, which turns out to resonate with people of all generations across several decades. The enduring appeal of Running Up That Hill is all the more remarkable. Exactly because it is, in many respects, very much an 80s song, realised on the latest electronic equipment of the day, which included a Linn drum machine, a Yamaha DX7 synthesizer, and most famously, a Fairlight CMI Series 2, one of the very first digital samplers, which at the time cost more than a house. Running Up That Hill was the first song Bush wrote for Hounds of Love, which is widely regarded as her finest moment, and the album on which she achieved the best fusion of her fondness for wild studio experimentation and her talent for writing immediately appealing tunes, song structures, and lyrics. Hounds of Love is Kate Bush's masterpiece, one of the classic albums of the 1980s. To this day, it continues to be included in lists of all-time classic albums. The making of Running Up That Hill and Hounds of Love are closely connected, and it's hard to talk about one without the other. So in this video, we'll examine exactly how Bush created the album and its lead single, and we'll try to establish what makes both album and single so great. First, we'll look at how Bush arrived at a point in her career that allowed her to create her magnum opus.
If only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to swear.
Kate Bush was born in southeast London on July 30th, 1958. Bush came from a musical family and started playing piano at the age of 11. She soon began writing songs, and at the age of 16, she was discovered by Pink Floyd guitarist David Gilmour.
Well, I'd been writing, I suppose, since I was about 13, seriously. And it was my family and my brother John who felt that it would be a good idea to see if we could get some of my songs published. And through a friend of the family, we made a contact with Dave Gilmour, who at that time was scouting for talent to perhaps produce or encourage. And he came down and heard some songs, and I think was impressed, and basically, eventually, put up the money for me to go into the studio and make 3 tracks properly produced, and through those tracks I got the recording contract.
He financed the professional recordings of 3 of her songs, which were made with the help of Andrew Powell, a composer, arranger, and friend of Gilmour and former Beatles engineer Geoff Emerick. Impressed by the recordings, EMI Records offered her a record contract, which she signed in July of 1976. It was that year that the punk wave engulfed the UK, and EMI was not entirely sure what to do with the newly signed 18-year-old prodigy, whose music seemed a bit old-style and romantic, not to mention the whiffs of the now taboo prog rock genre. So Bush spent an entire year playing around London with the Katie Bush Band, while EMI unsuccessfully tried to get her to work with several producers. The recordings for her first album took place during July and August 1977 at Air Studios in central London, again with Andrew Powell again producing and Gilmour as executive producer. The result, The Kick Inside, was released in February of 1978. Despite objections from EMI, Bush insisted on the song Wuthering Heights as the first single. The song became the first UK #1 that was entirely written by a female artist herself. Both the single and the album went to enjoy major international success. For more about Wuthering Heights, check out our Songs That Change music video about the song from last year. EMI pushed Bush to record a follow-up as quickly as possible, and Lionheart was released at the end of the same year, again produced by Andrew Powell, with help from Bush. The album was well received, but did not quite live up to expectations, not at least of Bush herself. As a result, Bush was determined to take more control of her career and set up her own publishing and management companies. She also planned to produce her next album. An inspiration for a new direction was provided by her guest performance on Peter Gabriel's third album, known as Melt. Bush sang on Gabriel's hit single Games Without Frontiers. But more importantly, during the sessions at the Townhouse Studios in London in the summer of 1979, she witnessed Gabriel working with digital synths and the Fairlight sampler, and was impressed by the wild sonic experimentation of the artist, engineer Hugh Padgham, and producer Steve Lillywhite, which led, among other things, to the invention of the famous gated drum sound of Phil Collins' drums on the album's opening track, Intruder. Recordings for Bush's third album started in September of 1979 at Abbey Road and Air Studios. Bush acted as producer with the help of engineer John Kelly. In contrast to her first 2 albums, which featured mainly a live in the studio band embellished with orchestra, she now experimented with overdubbing and used the Yamaha CS80 synthesizer and Fairlight sampler for the first time. The resulting album, Never Forever, was released in September of 1980 and marked a distinct shift in direction, landing somewhere between art rock, prog rock, and folk rock. Never Forever became Bush's first UK #1 and also did well in many other countries. The single Babushka became a big hit, and 2 other songs from the album, Breathing and Army Dreamers, have become Kate Bush classics. At this point, Bush was regarded as the UK's foremost female artist, though the US remained resistant to her music, ostensibly because she did not want to tour there and because her music did not fit in with any of the radio formats. Or perhaps it was just too strange and too adventurous. The critical and commercial success of Never Forever led Bush to abandon all restraints and venture more deeply into sonic and musical experimentation than ever before. She was the sole producer of her fourth album, and the sessions took place over more than 1.5 years at several London studios: Advision, Odyssey, Abbey Road, and the Townhouse. She had enlisted Hugh Padgham as engineer because she had liked his work when she had seen him in the studio with Gabriel. But as the sessions went over time, he was also scheduled to work with the Police. So on Hugh Padgham's recommendation, young engineer Nick Launey stepped in, and he's since gone on to become one of the most important producers in the music industry, and has also been interviewed on this channel.
Hugh started to do Kate Bush's record that became The Dreaming, right? And because Kate Bush had heard and seen what Hugh did on the Peter Gabriel album, and she does guest vocals on that, on Games Without Frontiers. So she wanted Hugh to engineer, and so he did. He started doing that record, but then he got a call. Well, he had already got a call from the Police to produce. Now, obviously, faced with engineering a record or produced the Police, who were one of the biggest bands on planet Earth at the time, obviously he went that way, which was very difficult, I think, for him because Kate Bush was a huge artist and a great artist. She just wanted an engineer that could get those sounds, and I knew how to get those sounds. So he recommended me, told her that I'd done this Flowers of Romance album. She listened to that, liked it, and then I was booked to engineer The Dreaming. So I spent about a month and a half.
Launey recalled about his work with Bush, "We were more or less the same age. So you must imagine two young people in their early 20s being in an incredible recording studio with incredible musicians. No mention of budget at all, just doing whatever came to her mind. And she has one of the biggest imaginations that has ever existed. It was like entering some fantasy world working with her. Every day was like, what sound world are we going to create today? Is this going to sound like a forest? At one stage, she wanted to have a drum sound that sounded like distant cannons. We were doing all kinds of crazy sound experiments. When EMI heard the finished album in summer of 1982, the record company nearly rejected it. But perhaps mindful of the person who ended up with egg on their face for wanting to reject Gabriel's third album, it did release The Dreaming in September of that year. It proved to be Bush's most divisive album. Reactions like bewildering, preposterous, and existing maximalist tendencies pushed to the brink of overload were not uncommon. The album also did far less well commercially. The Dreaming has since undergone a critical reassessment and is regarded far more positively today. However, in the years immediately after its release, it put Bush at odds with her record company. This had a strong impact on the way she approached the recordings for her fifth studio album, Hounds of Love.
Yes, I think the last album was quite an intense album. I think it was about emotion, and there were a lot of things that I wanted to say that I wasn't happy with. I was feeling mankind to be cruel, negative, and I think I expressed that in a lot of the songs. With this album, there was a completely different energy. I moved from the city to the country. I was surrounded by elemental forces, which I really feel feature on this album, and I was feeling really happy and positive and considering mankind to be much better than on the last album. So I think it's got a more positive energy.
With the benefit of hindsight, it is clear that she decided to continue with her sonic experimentations, but at least on a number of songs, fit them into a framework of more traditional and catchier song structures. There were other changes as well. In the summer of 1983, Bush and her long-term partner Del Palmer moved out of London, and the rural atmosphere of her new home contributed to a shift in mood.
You change with the environment, and my environment did change between the last album and this one. I moved out of the city and into the country, and I think those two energies are very apparent on both albums. The fourth album is very much an oppressed city atmosphere album, and this one that's just released is very much a freer, elemental album.
Did you feel a real need to get out into the country then?
I was getting fed up with being in London, yeah. I don't know about a real need, but I think it's a very good thing for me. I'm glad I did. It certainly helped me relax as a person.
And the first manifestation was Running Up That Hill, which Bush wrote one summer evening, using the Fairlight and a Linn drum machine pattern programmed by Palmer. The striking Fairlight sound, which was based on a cello sample, apparently triggered the rest of the song. At its core, Running Up That Hill is a love song, but not one that lives in the unbridled joy of infatuation or the deep agony of unrequited love. It is a song about love's incredible power, the element that makes it both wonderful and, at the same time, incredibly overwhelming. And with that overwhelming power often comes fear. In a 1985 interview, Bush explained, "This song is very much about two people who are in love, and how the power of love is almost too big for them. It leaves them very insecure and in fear of losing each other." Both verses focus on this fear. The song begins, "You don't want to hurt me, but you see how deep the bullet lies. Unaware, I'm tearing you asunder." Both partners are unintentionally bringing pain to the other, and it brings a growing frustration and intensity between them. She brilliantly captures this intensity in her singing, and that range of dynamics and her use of her breath. She also hits an uncomfortable truth. Is there so much hate for the ones we love? This is the part of love most songs don't talk about. As we become closer to one another, we also become more and more capable of hurting each other. And here's where the lyrics get more interesting. We call the song Running Up That Hill, but that line is only a tiny portion of the song's lyrics. The real title was, and in Bush's view still is, A Deal with God. The song is attributing some of these core challenges faced by the couple to their inability to understand each other. So she proposes making a deal with God so that they can swap places to truly learn what the other is experiencing and feeling. In a 1992 interview with Radio 1, Bush explained, "I was trying to say that a man and a woman can't understand each other because we are a man and a woman. And if we could actually swap each other's roles, if we could actually be in the other's place for a while, I think we'd both be very surprised. And I think it would lead to a greater understanding. Really, the only way I could think it could be done was either a deal with the devil, and I thought, well, no, why not a deal with God? Because in a way, it's so much more powerful, the whole idea of asking God to make a deal with you." In this way, Bush brilliantly flips the classic music cliche of making a deal with the devil on its head. From Paganini to Robert Johnson, music history is full of legends of musicians selling their soul to the devil to achieve musical prowess or fame or fortune. So we're used to hearing these ideas of supernatural arrangements in our music. But as we've seen her do time and again, Bush takes a familiar idea and makes it completely her own. In her singular way, she not only flips the imagery, but she changes the goal. Rather than a deal for personal gain or individual desire, she proposes a spiritual bargain to solve an age-old problem of relational conflicts between genders. Palmer and Bush recorded the demo of the song to an 8-track tape recorder they had at their country house, and the demo ended up providing the foundation for the mood and direction of the planned new album. More songs followed quickly, including Under Ice and Dreams of Sheep, Watching You Without Me, and Hounds of Love. While writing initial song ideas proved relatively straightforward, the more time-consuming next step was to create final versions that incorporated the sonic adventures Bush was keen on. Looking for more control over her music, Bush had by now installed a 48-track studio in a barn next to the family house where she grew up in East Wickham in London. A few years earlier, Bush had used the barn to write some material for her Lionheart album to 8-track. However, the studio that came into operation in the fall of 1983 was far more professional, with a Soundcraft desk and a 24-track tape machine that came with it, plus a Studer 880 24-track tape machine at its heart.
What were you looking for? What makes your studio special for you?
Well, it's got all the environmental things that we want, the right kind of sounding rooms, and we've got all the outboard equipment and the right kind of speakers and everything. It's what we want, which is why we did it. One of the main reasons for wanting to build our own studio was the amount of money that it was costing in a commercial studio per hour. And when you work experimentally, it actually becomes prohibitive when it's costing that amount of money, plus the distractions. So you've got to find a place, and you've got to get the best equipment in there that you can afford, because obviously it's very expensive stuff.
Bush and Palmer would bring their 8-track demos to the studio and load them onto one of the 24-track recorders. The original 8-track elements were used as the foundation for the final versions. In the case of Running Up That Hill, these were the main Fairlight sounds and Lindrum sounds. Fairlight string sounds were added, as well as synth chords from a Yamaha DX7, plus guitar parts played by Alan Murphy, bass by Del Palmer, additional drums by Stuart Elliot, and Kate's brother Paddy Bush played the balalaika. Hi everybody! As you know, Hounds of Love is one of my favourite records. Stuart Elliot was the drummer who played on that album. He also was pretty much on every Kate Bush record, right from the beginning of A Kick Inside. So it is my great pleasure to be able to talk to Stuart Elliot, who is the drummer for Kate Bush's records, the drummer on so many Kate Bush tracks, but also was the original drummer in A Cockney Rebel. Steve Harley and A Cockney Rebel. I wonder if you all remember that. Absolutely incredible band. A band that traversed between 70s kind of glam rock and new wave. A band that really sums up the 70s in such a positive way for British music. And his resume is insane. He's played with Paul McCartney. He's played with the Alan Parsons Project. He's played with everybody. Roger Daltrey. You name it. A wonderful guy, a wonderful talent. So let's talk to Mr. Stuart Elliot. When Hounds of Love came out, for instance, I mean, that was so massive in the UK, but didn't really resonate at all. And Kate never really has resonated in the US like you would expect her to. So it's crazy to see the Stranger Things that just explode.
I think at the time it came out 37 years ago. The American market was all kind of like gung ho for guitar rock, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah.
It was Bon Jovi and all that kind of thing. 80s rock.
Yeah.
So Kate's sort of kind of darker and more melodic side of things probably not quite what they were after.
No.
But having said that, I think Running Up That Hill is quite a contemporary sounding piece now.
Oh, ridiculous! Yeah.
So it's obviously called, I think the musical taste in America has changed, especially with the youth. It's very different now to what it was. So it's just, it's the final chance that it got. In fact, I don't know whether you know, but it's the Billboard Global #1 right now.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Whatever that means, I think that means it's a collation of everything. Don't think it means that it's the #1 position in every country. I think it means that everything in the world is kind of like being listened to the most. So, well, those were the days when you had side 1 and side 2, weren't they?
Yeah.
Which is, it's a kind of a sad loss, really, because I remember some of my favourite albums. There was a whole atmosphere on one side and a different atmosphere on the other side, and that's very much what Hounds of Love is like. Because the side two is the more sort of mellow kind of. What's incredible actually is the Bulgarian.
The ninth wave, the ninth wave. It's all sort of
it's an amazing piece of music. Even there's not a lot of drums in the second side, is it? But every track I ever did with Kate, since she became producer, started off live in the Fairlight. So they're all done to a click, and there was quite often some sort of Fairlight pattern that Del Palmer, her engineer and bass player, used to sort of get the track started. Running Up That Hill, I think that was a Lindrum that was placed on that, and it was my job to sort of replace bits and add sort of Simmons fills over the top. Now, I think, if I recall rightly, I think the Lindrum toms, I think I overdubbed some stuff under them as well to sort of loosen them up a bit. We played it in bits. It's not. I mean, I can play the pattern as a whole pattern, but it didn't. It didn't sort of didn't materialise by the time I'd sort of sussed it. It was like all different elements to it. But in fact, I did it live with Kate and David Gilmour.
I know that Hugh said when she came down and sung on Gabriel 3, Melt, as the Americans call it, everybody was just besotted with her on all levels, like how stupidly talented she was and just her whole presence.
Yeah, she blew us away then, you know, as a young kid. Mind you, we were all kids as well. I mean, I was only she was 19, I think I was 24 at the time.
You were the elder statesman of rock.
We were. But this little sort of hippie chick came in and just sat behind the piano, started playing and singing. That was what's so good about doing that first album with her, is that she was in the studio with us, playing a piano and singing. So it was made the job a lot easier. All you have to do is just play along with her. Was the whole song completed, or were you just getting in there to play parts? How was the process? She sent me a cassette demo, actually, to start off with, which she's never done before and never did since. And it was called Deal With God then. I think it was fairly sparsely produced. It was just an arrangement of the song, which she always has. She doesn't rearrange songs while we're in the studio. She gets it right to her satisfaction, and that's the way it kind of stays. Right. And as you probably know, her arrangements are quite complicated. Every moment in her songs is always not what you'd expect. Yeah. Never. It's never the amount of bars you'd expect and the beats you'd expect. That's like Wuthering Heights, 5/4 verses. It's dominated by her lyrics. She's got a lyrical idea. That's how long it is. Just turns out that it's a 5/4 bar because it's a complete lyric. So there we go. So what is your memories of coming down and playing on Hounds of Love? Sort of, when Kate sort of presented a song, it wasn't complete, but it was complete enough to perform to, which is half the battle really. Because if it's just like a click track and a pad, like we used to do in the 80s, put a pad down. Oh, now we'll start building it up. It was never like that. And she always had a full vocal as well. Full vocal, which is the most important thing for me. So, as long as you got that performance on the vocal, which she does that in her own time, and then you've got something to play to. I actually prefer doing it live, but that's not the way it works. There was one track we did live, I think it was Rocket's Tale. It was just me and Kate. She was playing keyboard. She was in the studio with me, and I was thrashing the drums. There's a big sort of drum thing at the end. So it was a mixture of performance modes for that album. But it was so varied. I've never worked on an album that's demanded like a different drum sound for absolutely every song. We go into room. She had a stone room. She had a wood room, and there was a tiny little dead room at the end where I think we did. I've done cloud busting there, just the sort of snare, the military snare, everything dry. Sounds like a Lynn drum, but it isn't. So it was a real period of exploration. With Running Up That Hill, you added live drums to the Lynn drum part, the tom part, to just make it feel more natural. Yeah. We eliminated completely the bass, the kick, and the snare from the Lynn. I think we kept the Lynn toms and sort of did something to make them sound less rigid. I think it was a few days later, actually. I did the fills in the middle 8, which was my Simmons SDS7, as I recall. The SDS7 had these little microchips in it, EPROMs they were called. So it was blown in, a sample was blown into this thing, EPROM with legs. Put it in the module, play it. And then I think one of them had an explosion, like thunder or something. So I had one of the pads was like the explosion, and the other one was the Simmons toms. So that's how we got the fills at the end. Palmer recorded Bush's vocals, and in an interview in Sound on Sound in 1993, he explained, "I can't take any credit for Kate's vocal sound. Engineer Paul Hardiman showed me how to get the sound which they had started using on The Dreaming. Kate loved it, and ever since then we've been using it.
Basically, it's all down to an overdose of compression and the fact she really knows how to work with it. We set her up with a Neumann U47 in the live part of the studio, brick floor and stone walls, so it's very, very live. And then there's loads and loads of compression on the mic. In 1985, Palmer would have used an 1176 or Teletronics LA2A for this. He elaborated, "What's happening is that every time she breathes in, you can hear it, so she has to be very specific in the way she deals with this. If Kate's singing really loud, she backs off from the mic and then comes right in close for the quiet stuff. But when she breathes in, she does this to the side. She's backing off from the microphone all the time, really working it. We also use a small amount of gating, so you'll hear the sound of the room and then it cuts off, a bit like the Phil Collins drum sound. When it comes to the mix, you don't have to push the vocal up as high as you might imagine. Because with that sound, you're getting so much high frequency, it's real borderline stuff. Sometimes you can go too far and it'll break up or distort, or it'll really blow your ears off. But if you get it just right, you're getting so much high frequency that you can just push the voice right down and it will still cut through everything." The recording sessions for Hounds of Love at Wickham Farm Studio continued for 2 years, until June of 1985. In many ways, they were a family affair, with Palmer and Bush working closely together, and her parents, as well as her brothers, John and Paddy, often dropping by and coming up with ideas, and Paddy playing a number of instruments. Several engineers were involved, mostly Hayden Bendel, Paul Hardiman, and Brian Tench. The latter mixed all but 2 tracks on the album. So I'm going to talk to Brian Tench. Brian has told me that they actually recorded this on a Soundcraft console, but not only a Studer tape machine, but a Soundcraft tape machine. So it's a 24-track Soundcraft synced to a Studer A80 machine. And I didn't know, but it was actually mixed at Kate's studio as well. So Brian, for an album that at the time sounded so incredibly modern, it's amazing to hear that it was all done at Kate's studio, all the mixing. I was just assuming you went to some flashy room with an SSL and hundreds of pieces of outboard, tape machine, everything all synced up digitally. But no.
I think that is the preconception of that album. Everyone goes, "Oh, it sounds so fantastic." I think it just evolved naturally. The sound from the situation, the room we were in, the speakers we had, because we didn't
What
really
were the speakers?
Little AR-15s. They were old, rather than NS10s.
I have a pair down there because of Hugh Padgham.
Yeah, so that's why I think Kate had them. And there were some other big speakers which we hardly ever used because they didn't really sound great in the room, because the room wasn't really treated properly. It was pretty much a home studio that was just,
So one of the most hi-fi sounding records of all time was done in a home studio.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Everyone goes, "Oh, wow, it sounds timeless." I think a lot of that's Kate's instrumentation, for one, and the Fairlight. But I had worked with Visage and Ultravox and from like 79 onwards with electronic drums. So Lin drums and all the things that they had at those times, with Midge and Rusty doing those things. So I knew what I thought was, for me, the sound I wanted to get out of those particular drums, because they weren't real sounding drums. They never would be at that point in time. Now, of course, it's very different. But then it was the drums out of a box,
But Stuart Elliot did come in and play. What did Stuart come in and play on?
He overdubbed the tom-toms. I think there's extra tom-toms and fills.
Yep.
And things like that. Yeah. If you also notice, there are no hi-hats or cymbals.
Yeah.
On the whole album.
Which is great, which is very much like Melt, Peter Gabriel 3, that she had also sung on.
Yeah.
That had no cymbals.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting spillover with the same speakers that Hugh's using, the no cymbals on the record.
Yeah.
Peter also notorious for taking a long time and being a total perfectionist.
Yeah. Oh, if I remember rightly, I think the mix for Running Up That Hill was on the desk for something like 8 days.
Wow.
Maybe longer.
Did you mix multiple 2 tracks and then do any splicing between 2 tracks?
It was mixed to a 1/2 inch, an Ampex 1/2 inch.
Yeah.
No, we'd mix sections. Sometimes they're even just 2-bar sections where we'd all be like, the 3 of us would have something to do. And then we go, oh, did you get that? Was everyone okay? Then we play it back and go, yeah, that's great. Now let's do the next bit. So, the mix was set, so it played all the way through. But then you had to have, little bits and pieces that moved, cut out, didn't need to be there, or levels raised, following the vocal here and there. So there was a lot to do. And some of the mixes, we had like pencils taped, so you could push up, 5 faders at the same time that had a choir on it, and then pull them back out again, and it was all manual. The big sound on Hello Earth, I think, was us throwing bricks into the pool out in the back garden, recording on a Nagra and then slowing it down. It was just, these days you just go, oh, we want this, and it's there at a button. It wasn't then. Everything had to be created.
But in that creativity, you got something that was completely unique that nobody else had.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Incredible.
It was. It was one. Just from Kate being in sort of standing there, she'd go, "Oh, right, yeah. Let me just go and try this." And she'd go into the room and go, "Okay," and then play the tape, and all of a sudden this voice would come out, and you go, and you come again, how was that? And you just go, was that, oh my gosh, it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Oh, the expressiveness in her vocals on this record are unbelievable. Obviously that's been her hallmark. She is one of the most expressive singers that ever lived, but this album in particular was incredible for that.
As I said, I think it was one of the best times I've had, mate. We'd go there and I'd get attacked by the 2 dogs, Bonnie and Clyde, who were on the album cover, every day until literally the last month where they got used to me. But before that, it was like, rah, 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 and tea and breakfast. And we just had really nice days. The little room where we had tea and dinner, and all the little sit opposite each other and talk about what we're going to do for the day for breakfast. So yeah, it was a real. She said it was the happiest she'd been making an album for.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
For the first time. So, and I think that comes over in the album as well.
Yeah, I love the fact that all of her albums are incredible. This one stands head and shoulders above, and the one that she had the most control on. So it's a real testament, with the least kind of availability on expensive studios and all of that stuff. So really does say that creativity is king.
Sorry. So yeah, I think after the Dreaming, where she had spent all that time and going around in all these, for her to be just settled and just go to the places she needed to go to record bits and pieces, like go and do the choir or go to Ireland to record the Irish musicians which she wanted on the album. As you say, it just gave her that control, and she knew she'd come back to her base, and we had all the tapes then. Oh, put that up. We need to bounce this off and, put that onto that 24 track, and this is going to be the mixtape. So it was, a great time. Really was a great time.
Yeah, so the Medici Quartet on Cloudbursting, is it only the quartet, or is there some synth strings? Okay.
Yeah. You can hear them. You can hear the difference between... and I think what the movement that you get from the quartet across the top of the actual sort of program strings gives the song that charm almost.
And where are those strings from? Are those from the Fairlight?
I think they were. Yeah, I think they were. There might have been another synth involved. I'm not sure. Again, so
Well, there's DX7 is talked about a lot on the record, but my memories of DX7 aren't very favourable when it comes to string sounds.
no, we didn't. I did a lot because she had a lot of the tracks ready, and then when I came, well, not ready, but they'd been started. So we did a lot of overdubbing. I said we put a song up, like starting running up the hill, finished it. She had to do bit vocals, some backing vocals, some other bits and pieces. There were some effects to put on it, and then we went into the mixing. So we finished the first. We actually did the album, like we finished the first half, and then started on the ninth wave, knowing there was going to be a lot of work in that. I think Kate knew there was going to be a lot of work in that. Little bits, all those little voices. We had to fly those voices in. I mean, they weren't done to the thing. They were literally recorded and fly it in off the quarter inch. Oh, that's not quite in time. And, it needs to start there. And there was a lot of flying in done of bits, effects, voices. I think that gave us the creativity, or made the creativity, because you didn't have everything in the box. So the sound that Kate heard in her head was the one that Del and I would have to try and create somehow, some way. Or Kate would go, "No, this is the starting point, and I need it to go," because she knew what she wanted to hear. So it was getting that.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
The voice on Waking the Witch to Deep Voice, I think it got like 4 or 5 people to try it and they couldn't do it. So that is Kate.
Did you slow it down for the pitch?
No, it's done through a harmonizer, I believe.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So like an Eventide harmonizer?
It would have been Eventide, I think.
Like the H3000?
Not sure it's the H3000. Might have been.
Right.
Could have been the AMS again. I'm not sure.
Oh, the AMS. Okay.
Yeah, might have been the AMS.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes me just want to go back and listen again, which is all I've been doing for many, many years. I personally wore that album out. It was in the days of vinyl where you would listen to the first side for 2 weeks before you'd even turn it over to the second side.
Yeah. I remember finishing the first sort of cut of the second side of the ninth wave, and rushing over to my friend's studio going, "You're not going to believe what I've got here," and putting it on, and they just all, they were listening to the show and they just went, "What is this?" They'd not heard anything like it before, and and there'd been concept albums and things like that, but it just, one of my favourite mixes that I've ever done is And Dream of Sheep. From the very bing, as soon as that starts, and I love the reverb sound that we got. I love the piano sound, everything about it. The little voices, again, having to be flown in, the wails, the radio voices, everything.
The mixing on it is absolutely superb. I imagine it's a combination of incredibly well recorded, plus wonderful mixing. Everything on that album has a place. There doesn't feel like there's parts just there to fill ever. No. It's so well thought out that it sounds so natural. It just sounds really beautifully natural. Sometimes records that are that thought out sound like it. They just sound far too deliberate and stodgy and boring to listen to. This album is just pure excitement from beginning to end without any stereotype of ideas. There's no, like, when choruses come in, they don't just suddenly go super wide with things on the left and right. I mean, the lifts are all combination of musical change, but like sonic change, like more interesting stuff comes in. I mean, absolutely superb. And it's...
Yeah, I'm just saying, as Kate says, it was, I think it comes over the fact that she was just enjoying herself making the album. She was in a good place and just loving making the album. And I just think that comes over.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree entirely. Any kind of tidbits, anything you want to add to it that you think would be really important for people to know?
There's a certain way to listen to it that which is how we made it. It was made to sit back and just let it flow over you from the start to the finish. To sit there and just enjoy everything about it and feel. I mean, you feel everything about that second side as well. You feel what she's going through.
Right.
You are taken on that journey. It's not.
Yeah.
You go, that's the first song. Oh, because that lovely movement from And Dream of Sheep into Under Ice is just wonderful. And suddenly it's just dark. The whole thing is dark. It stays dark, right the way through Waking the Witch. And then you just suddenly start to see little lights. And the jig is, what can I say? The musicianship is fantastic. And again, it's such fun.
Did you record John Williams?
No, I didn't. No, that was already done.
That must have been quite wonderful.
Again, it was the bits I recorded, lots of the little bits and pieces that went on in the end. John's poem, her brother's poem that he's read, And again, we have fun. Well, where should we put this voice? Should that voice go over there? Should this? No, it needs to be in the background, And they're like, oh, in Under Ice, which is so distant, but you can hear it.
Yeah.
And it's
incredible.
And it just, you go, what? Oh. And it makes you just go back again. I don't know if you ever, when with vinyl, you go, what did, you just go back and listen to, a lot of my friends say they just would listen to it and go, I heard something. No, let me listen. I definitely heard something. And they go back and go, there you are, and that's it. There's all the little bits and pieces happening everywhere. It's fantastic.
Lots of beautiful ear candy.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
I love the lyrical idea of running up that hill is just incredible, about having a man and woman. How could they understand each other better? So they swap genders.
Yeah. Kate's mind.
It's just an incredible idea for a song.
The interview she did for the Hounds Love, I got to say, I know I'm promoting something else, but it's her talking about how she wrote the songs. And I think you hear the love she has for the album and how the creative process came about, which led on to what you got finally as a finished product. I still can't remember that other reverb that we used, which was on Running Up That Hill.
Oh, Quantec.
That's it. It's a Quantec. Yes.
So that was when you were mixing. You also had a Quantec reverb.
Yeah. Kate loved
QRS
the reverb because it was quite harsh.
Yeah.
And it had a reverb quality that was fairly brittle. That still kept its shape somehow. It was a nice box, but it was highly unreliable at the time. Just used to overheat and freeze up. And we'd have to switch it on and off and re-put in the settings. Oh, we also had Lexicon 224. That's all the little light, all those long reverbs, which the Lexicon was just the cream of. It might have been, was it a 480? No, I think it was a 224 at that point.
And then Del said that when she was doing the vocals with that huge amount of compression, that it was all about how she controlled her head movements. So when she would sing loud, she would pull back, quiet, forward, but then breaths, she would turn her head away so the breaths weren't too loud.
Her vocal control is incredible. There's, in Jig of Life, there's a passage where she goes, and now in the mind is soon in the mind is no memory, and she sings this passage of song, and you go, and you hear her taking the breath at the end, and the control that she would have to have had to just keep that going, and it was all one take. It's not no droppings in it at all. It shows, I think, her vocal capacity. She's actually a really, really, really good singer, but people just think she just has that quirky voice, but it's not. She is a really good singer. When she wants to let emotion and let the tone go up and go down, and it's, yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. And then he also said it was in a brick room.
It was in the studio room where we, had a couple of screens. There were a couple of screens.
Couple of screens, but did you find you had a lot of, with that amount of compression, you had a lot of room bleed in the vocal as well?
Yeah, the screens were pretty good. They'd cut generally, and if you're close to the mic, you're not getting too much of the other stuff going around. And if the mic's on directional, it's not. So I didn't really find that we had too much problem with that at all.
Right.
But Del might be remembering that he then went on to engineer on the SSL, which came in afterwards, the next album, which is, you know, it's very different. Yeah.
Right.
Working on Soundcraft.
Did you have any gating available to you?
Yes, we had a couple of gates. Can't remember which ones they were, but yeah, they used a lot. Obviously,
maybe the drummers. Were the drummers around?
Might have been the drummers. Yeah, it could have been drummers. Yeah, we did hire in some, obviously, because you would need some stuff. So there were, you know, hire companies back in the day, and we'd get a rack in which had a certain amount of bits and pieces in it. Drummers probably, and a couple of some other 76s maybe, and a couple of other bits, because there wasn't a lot of outboard gear in the studio. So yeah, we were, I think, audio hire, whatever they were called at the time. You know, we'd get some stuff in.
Bush had the idea to split the album into two suites. The vinyl album side A contained the Hounds of Love suite, and side B the Ninth Wave. Side A contained the more accessible material and included the album's 4 singles, Running Up That Hill, Cloud Bursting, Hounds of Love, and The Big Sky. In an interview at the time of the album's release, Bush remarked, "It's almost like 2 separate albums for me, in that the first side is 5 separate songs. If they're linked, it's only by the theme of love, and they're all forms of love songs. They're about relationships. The second side of the album is a conceptual piece, which is 7 songs all linked together, very much something that was designed and written to work as one piece of music. The 5th song of the first side, Cloud Bursting, was released as the second single and also became a big hit, propelled by the strings of the Medici Sextet and a remarkable video featuring actor Donald Sutherland." Producer and Killing Joke member Youth played bass on the 3rd song on side A, The Big Sky, and he noted that the overdubbing process contributed to the futuristic sound of the album, as did the fact that Palmer and Bush often loaded musicians' performances into the Fairlight using a novel technique that today is quite commonplace. "She gave me some direction and then let me do what I liked. Then she chopped it up and arranged it in the Fairlight. It doesn't have that natural dynamic arrangement and progression that you would have with musicians playing together. It's quite flat and modern. People work like that today all the time, but then it was quite unusual. It was selection rather than musicianship, the currency of ideas reflected in the music rather than academic virtuosity." According to all accounts of those that were there, Bush was entirely in her element with all the modern technology, and was not only pushing the Fairlight to its limits, but was also deeply involved in the engineering side. Engineer Hayden Bendel recalls she'd come up with suggestions like, maybe we should compress that, maybe we should expand that, maybe we should gate that, or put a pre-delay on the reverb. And she had an incredible audio memory. She'd remember a take she did on the vocal, where one particular word was great, although on that track 13 there was this great sound. Bush's experimental side dominated the Ninth Wave suite, which from a sonic perspective was an extension of the dreaming. Among the many unusual textures are a Gregorian choir, and the sound of helicopter blades taken from Pink Floyd's The Wall. Someone aptly wrote about the Ninth Wave that the deeply emotional and thrillingly berserk sit side by side. Bush herself explained it like this.
It's about someone who is in the water for the night, alone in the water. And it's really about their past, present and future coming to keep them awake, to stop them drowning, to stop them going to sleep until the morning comes.
It isn't immediately obvious, is it, if you listen to the album?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if that's relevant or important, though. I think the most important thing is that people that listen to it get something out of it that they enjoy.
Clearly, Bush took this as a cue to let the power of her sonic imagination loose as well. The sessions briefly decamped to Windmill Lane in Dublin, Ireland, where a number of Irish traditional musicians were recorded, which can be heard most prominently on Jig of Life. Other musicians who overdubbed on the album included bassist Eberhard Weber and Danny Thompson, and classical guitarist John Williams on the closing track, The Morning Fog. After 2 years of hard work, Bush finally delivered the album to EMI in the summer of 1985. She later said, "I never was so pleased to finish anything in my life. There were times I never thought it would be finished. It was just such a lot of work, but I did love it, and everyone that worked on the album was wonderful. It was the happiest I've been when I'd been writing and making an album. I know there's a big theory that it's not real art unless you suffer, but I don't believe this, because I think in some ways this is the most complete work I've done. It is the best, and I was the happiest I've been compared to making other albums." The big shots at EMI certainly were also very happy when they listened to the master tapes of Hounds of Love and realised it contained several potential hits. They wanted to release Cloudbursting as the first single, but Bush once again managed to convince them to choose another song, Running Up That Hill, though there was one potential source of friction that had to be ironed out. The song was still called A Deal with God, and EMI was concerned that purely the use of the word God would be controversial and might lead to the song being banned in certain countries. For once, Bush relented, and the single was released as Running Up That Hill, but on the album the full title was used, Running Up That Hill, brackets, A Deal with God. Hounds of Love was released a month after Running Up That Hill on September the 16th, 1985. It went straight to number 1 in the UK, and critical reactions to both Running Up That Hill and the album were ecstatic. One reviewer memorably wrote, "If I were allowed to swear, I'd say that Hounds of Love is effing brilliant, but me mum won't let me." Another review called the album a perfect marriage of technique and exploration. However, most American reviewers weren't quite getting it, with the New York Times calling the album slightly precious, calculated female art rock. Over time, American critics have also come around to recognising Kate Bush's genius, and Hounds of Love and Bush's entire oeuvre, which today stands at 10 studio albums, has been quoted as a huge influence by hundreds and hundreds of artists. Amongst them are Tori Amos, Annie Lennox, PJ Harvey, Björk, Alanis Morissette, Suzanne Vega, Fiona Apple, Ellie Goulding, St. Vincent, Florence Welch, Lily Allen, Charlie XCX, Grimes, Solange Knowles, Coldplay, Tricky, Johnny Rotten, Rufus Wainwright, and Steve Wilson. Running Up That Hill, with its machine-like drums and bright synth sounds, perfectly captured the 80s synth-pop zeitgeist, and it went on to become one of the classic songs of the decade. However, it had already transcended its decade even before the newfound popularity of 2022. Bush played the song live a number of times, and in 2012 she remixed it with new vocals for playback during the Summer Olympics closing ceremony in London. As a result, the new remix went to number 6 in the UK charts that year. In 2014, Bush performed the song and in fact most of Hounds of Love during her live show Before the Dawn, which marked her return to the stage after 35 years. A live album of that show included Running Up That Hill and was released in 2016. Fast forward another 6 years, and Running Up That Hill and the music of Kate Bush are being discovered by an entire new generation. Given the excellence of the song and of Bush's entire oeuvre, one can only second Bush's own words and call the development utterly brilliant. I don't know what to say about this. If you've watched my channel ever, I use Hounds of Love all the time as a reference point for some of the greatest production ever. All my hairs are standing on end at this moment, just explaining to you how beautiful it is to hear that Running Up That Hill is number one in multiple countries, and now in America is being heralded for the absolute brilliance and genius for what it is. That album, Hounds of Love, is an absolute masterpiece. Every musician I know has always held it up to be one of the greatest. We've talked about doing this album many, many times. People have asked, I've made statements saying it's really high on the list. And I went and started researching this before the song came out. And then it comes out in that wonderful TV show, which everybody I know seems to love, Stranger Things, which is amazing. And I thought that was great, but who knew? It just needed to be unleashed for people to be A, reminded, or B, to hear it for the first time, for everybody to realize just how incredible it is. Even to this day, it does not sound dated. In fact, even comparing it to the 80s is really selling it short, because when it came out, it was the best thing I had heard. I wore out my vinyl copy. I wore it out. There were weeks where it was the only thing I listened to. Kate Bush is an insanely talented singer, songwriter, producer, multi-instrumentalist. We didn't even talk about the fact that she directed and choreographed her own videos as well. The video for this is beautiful. It's simplistic but gorgeous and works so well. And the idea behind the song is incredible. The idea of a man and a woman swapping their gender so they can understand each other better. Unbelievable. My hat is off to you, Kate Bush. You've always been a massive inspiration for me. Anybody who's been in my sphere will know that I talk about Kate Bush's records all the time. This is an absolute pinnacle of her career, but all of her albums stand head and shoulders above many, many other artists. And I'm so happy that this new generation and people that didn't even know it came out are now getting to hear it. I'll tell you, my 15-year-old son loves all kinds of music. And I was so overjoyed when he was about 10 or 11 to play him this for the first time and have his mind blown. What an album. What an artist. Thank you, Kate, for making such incredibly emotive music that still sounds fresh and modern and like nothing else ever. If you haven't already, please check out the Wuthering Heights video that we did, which is a complete masterpiece. What a song. Check out that video as well. Thank you ever so much for watching. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, toutes zines, adios, ciao, goodbye. Thank you ever so much for watching. Please give us any other songs, albums, or artists that you would like us to cover. Goodbye.